Hare Krishna. So this is the first of 8 one-hour sessions looking at Lord Chaitanya's Siksastaka prayers. And the Siksastaka is a combination of two words, Shiksha for instructions or teachings, and Ashtaka means 8. The Prabhupada just translates them in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the word for word just says 8 instructions. So that's what that means. There's 8 verses. 8 prayers that we'll be looking at. And this is the only written composition that's known from Lord Chaitanya. And so this is the only thing he wrote down that he composed himself. So I think from that we can understand it must be something really special. And there's a lot of other of his instructions and teachings that have come directly and indirectly. In the Caitanya Charitamrita, there are 2 extensive conversations, one each with Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. And they later on, took those instructions and expanded upon them and systematized them and gave us, some wonderful writings that communicate with us Lord Chaitanya's instructions as they received them and as they expanded upon them. He gave them that responsibility to be conduits of his teachings that way. So those writings were indirectly what he spoke. Some of the things they quoted directly, and other things they expanded upon it. So we received him also in those ways. There are dialogues also with Prakashananda Saraswati, where the impersonalist philosophy is debated. And so those that they're in the Caitanya Charitamrita also. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, also there's a dialogue with Lord Chaitanya there about a similar topic. So Lord Chaitanya did more. There was more from his teachings. We've actually just these verses, but these are the only things he put in writing. And we're going to take the point of view here that's given by. We're going to look at the Siksastaka from the viewpoint that Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions in his Bhajan Rahasya. He says there's a correspondence between the 8 Siksastaka verses and the stages of bhakti that are given in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And Prabhupada quotes these 2 verses there's 2 verses from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that describes the various stages of devotional service. They're in the first wave, chapter 4, verses 15 and 16, and they're quoted. You can find them in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 10 in the purport. And Prabhupada quotes them there. Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivritti Shat Tato Nishta Ruchis Tata Atasaktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Bhidanchati Satakanam Ayam Premna Pratarbhave Bhavet Kramaha. The krama means step. So by step, bhakti goes. And then Prabhupada gives the translation of that also in the purport. He quotes the verses and then translates them. He says, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This is called Shraddha. By the way, it says Adao Shraddha in the verse. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. So that's the sadhu sangha, associating with devotees. And Prabhupada goes on, he says, in the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. This means the practice of devotional service. That's in the verse, that's bhajana kriya. So you associate with devotees, you become interested in Krishna consciousness, you start taking up the practice, and at some point, you want to formalize that, and that's usually the process of initiation. Therefore, I'm going to take up the full practice of bhakti. And then Prabhupada says, by execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment. This is in the verses anartha nivritti, the removal of unwanted things. Anarthas are things that don't have value. Artha means value or something desirable. So things that are not desirable or don't have any value, the negativities in us go away. Okay. Then it says, Prabhupada says, attains steadiness and self-realization. That's nishta in the verse. Steadiness. And when we are, because there's still remaining material attachment, when we take up the process of devotional service, we have enthusiasm which waxes and wanes. Sometimes we have greater enthusiasm than others. There's a book by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Madhurya Kadambini, which we're going to refer to a lot, that elaborates on the two verses we quoted from Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So he describes also these stages. He says it's thick and thin. He says it's like you can have milk is very thin, and when you cook it down, to form rubbery or even burfi, it becomes very thick. So sometimes our enthusiasm and our level of service increases, but it fluctuates because there's competition between the material desires and our desire for spiritual things, for Krishna. And then when so many of the material attachments are removed, that kind of competition is ended, and one can be very steady. And as this Prabhupada says, attains steadiness and self-realization. Then he says, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So this is ruchi, or taste. So when there's not so much conflict any longer between our material desires and spiritual aspirations, we become, it says the process of bhakti becomes very, very tasteful, and the enthusiasm becomes very, very strong and consistent. So we've experienced taste, probably the higher taste, at high level, sometimes very strong levels of enthusiasm and happiness in devotional service. But this stage is something very deep and profound. There's a profound level of this taste and enthusiasm, and it's very steady. It doesn't appear and disappear. Then Prabhupada says this taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness. So that means that and it says Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that we come, there's a strong attachment for Krishna and Krishna consciousness. So it's deepening even from the taste. So the word asakti, that's what's in the verse. It really can translate as addiction. So it's just, there's this profound attachment to it. It's not even just tasteful, but there's a strong, powerful, profound attachment. And so this takes us to the last stage of devotional service and practice, sadhana bhakti. And then he says the taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love for God. So at that stage, the false ego is gone. You actually are it's no longer devotional service and practice, but it's in perfection. But it's an immature stage of perfection. And he says real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. So there isn't an exact one-for-one correspondence. There's actually 9 stages there and 8 verses of the Siksastaka. As it turns out, the second verse has 3 of those stages in it. And the last 2 verses refer to one of the stages, the prema. There's not a one-for-one correspondence, but this is what's being described throughout the Siksastaka. And I think if we understand that, it helps us. One thing, it'll help the Siksastaka to guide us in understanding bhakti and how it progresses. And if we understand that the Siksastaka is dealing with these deeper and deeper and deeper and ultimate perfect levels of devotion, we'll understand, because we can read the Siksastaka, and if we think it's something that's fully accessible to us right now, we won't realize how profound it is. We hear about having some taste in there, and we've had that. Even the very last verse, which is dealing with prema, talks about being devoted to Krishna unconditionally. Well, we can make some sense of that. We can aspire for that. But what's behind that in this verse is something very, very profound. So I think we can see that the Siksastaka is not something that we can just kind of take, quickly understand, and incorporate into our devotion, and then kind of be done with it. It's something that will be with us, um, you know, forever. I mean, even we'll see that Lord Chaitanya, we'll read a verse where it says he was relishing these verses after he composed them. So even at the very highest level of devotion, these verses are really powerful. So there's something we can incorporate into our devotional lives, on an ongoing basis, and something. And because they're simple in some ways, and they're short, we can really develop a deep relationship with them. I think there's something that can really be powerful in our practice on an ongoing basis. And one of the things in most of the verses, the Lord Chaitanya is giving his own, he's expressing what he's feeling at these different stages. Most of the verses are like that. So it makes it very concrete. Here's somebody who has devotion. He's expressing what the stage of devotion is like. Sometimes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does that in Madhurya Kadambini also, but sometimes he just gives a more abstract definition. So here you see in a very concrete way someone who has devotion at these different levels. And so and of course, coming from Lord Chaitanya, whose representation of that will be perfect. So this is very, very wonderful. What I really want to do more than anything else, what I want to accomplish in the course is I want us to be able to take the Siksastaka, find where we are. A lot of us are going to be fairly early on, as we'll see, and be able to find where we are, and then be able to use the Siksastaka as a kind of a roadmap. What do we need to do? What do we need to acquire? What kind of attitude it has to come in? What is the way forward to the next stage? I want it to be a real guidepost for us. Be able to see how we can grow in our Krishna consciousness. So I think if we really can absorb something about the Siksastaka, really understand what it's talking about, it will be really, really, really valuable for us on the spiritual path. And a note on the translations. Most people are familiar with the translations that are in. You'll find them in the introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam and most other places. Are the common translations we have of the Siksastaka. But Srila Prabhupada, in the final chapter of Caitanya Charitamrita, it's Antya-lila chapter 20, called the Siksastaka prayers, appropriately. Lord Chaitanya recites the prayers in there. And Prabhupada gives somewhat more elaborate translations. This is a little bit closer to the Sanskrit and a little bit more complete in some ways than in the other versions that we commonly. Those were done by Prabhupada, so there's no problem with them. I think we can find there's some advantages, especially when we're looking at them more deeply, in using the more elaborate translations he gives there. So that's what we're going to be, the translations we'll be using come from Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila, chapter 20. It's the final chapter of the Siksastaka. And we're going to look at chapter 20, at least part of it, because that's where Lord Chaitanya, he doesn't compose the verses there. They're already composed. But he's at the last stages of his appearance here on earth, and he recites them and he reacts to them. He makes a few comments afterwards, and it's described what he's going through, that what kind of attitude comes onto him that causes him to go deeper and recite the next one. So that we get to, it's really interesting to not only have the verse, but have Lord Chaitanya's reaction and some description into what causes him to continue the recitation. And there's I'm quoting from the Antya-lila 2139. This is after where we're going to look through, but it says, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu composed those 8 stanzas to instruct the devotees, but he also personally tasted their meaning. See, so it's another indication how extraordinary and valuable these verses are. He found them useful, for his own. Because what was happening at that time, he was living in Jagannath Puri, Nilachala, and it's actually described here in the Anchalila chapter 20, verse 3. It says, while Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu thus resided at Jagannath Puri, Nilachala Dham, he was continuously overwhelmed night and day by separation from Lord Krishna. And the next verse says, day and night he tasted transcendental blissful songs and verses with his two associates, namely Sarup Damodar Goswami and Ramananda Roy. He relished the symptoms of various transcendental emotions such as jubilation, lamentation, anger, humility, anxiety, grief, eagerness, and satisfaction. So this was verse 5. And then it says that he would recite, this is verse 6, he would recite his own verses, expressing their meanings and emotions, and thus enjoy tasting them with these two friends. So sometimes this is 7, sometimes the Lord would be absorbed in a particular emotion and would stay awake all night reciting related verses and relishing their taste. So this is the very end of his appearance. And Lord Chaitanya is combined, Radha and Krishna combined. It's mentioned very early in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says that that Radha and Krishna are one eternal, are initially are one, but they've separated themselves eternally so that they can have pastimes. And with Lord Chaitanya, he wanted to feel the mood of Radharani, so they became one again. So it says Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, but he has the golden complexion and the emotions of Srimati Radharani. And he showed that to Ramananda Roy when they had that's another place where Lord Chaitanya gives instructions. He gives instructions through the mouth of Ramananda Roy. But he shows himself, he shows himself as being both Radha and Krishna, reveals that to Ramananda Roy. And what seems to happen during the course of his life, when he's a child, his childhood pastimes, he's more like baby Krishna. And all the way up until he gets initiated by Ishvara Puri, his devotional part of him doesn't show up much. He was known as Nimai Pandit, and he was so beautiful and so charming and so learned, and that everybody loved him. But the Vaishnavas were somewhat disappointed. Sometimes they even expressed it to his face. When will this person become a Vaishnava? Why he seems to be so proud of all of his knowledge. And so he was more in the mood of Krishna. And then the mood of Radharani devotion starts to come out when he gets initiated. There was a sudden transformation. He comes back with these ecstatic symptoms that people were afraid he was losing his mind. That there's a wind disorder, right? The prana, or the life air, the way it flows, affects the mind. It's like, if you have pranayama, even now we see, if you're angry, you take a deep breath, the flow of prana changes the mind. And so they said when there's a disorder in the prana or the wind, you lose your mind. So they were really worried for him when they first saw his return. It was so amazing, such a shocking transformation. And so as he went along, more and more the mood of Radharani came out. And by the time of the end of his Leela, when he's there, he's very much he's living in the Gambhira, kind of secluding himself with these two close devotees who were in Krishna Leela, or Lalita and Vishaka, is some of Radharani's closest associates. And so he was then deep in the mood of separation, in the mood of Radharani. And so especially the later verses, and especially the last two, come fully from the voice of Srimati Radharani. It's very so Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya here is now deeply in the mood of Radharani, deep in devotion at this time. So it's really a powerful moment, and then he's relishing his own verses here. So it's really something. So Chaitanya Charitamrita Anchalita, chapter 20, verse 8. This is leading now into his recitation. In great jubilation, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu said, "My dear Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy, know from me that chanting the holy names is the most feasible means of salvation in this age of Kali." In this age of Kali, this is verse 9, the process of worshiping Krishna is to perform sacrifice by chanting the holy name of the Lord. One who does this, the one who does so is certainly very intelligent, and he attains shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. And then here, this is actually, he's quoting from a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, in the age of Kali, but this is Lord Chaitanya speaking. He says, in the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the name of Krishna. That's Lord Chaitanya. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He's golden. Right? So Krishna is usually blackish, but he's golden as Lord Chaitanya. These are the verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam that predict Lord Chaitanya's appearance. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Interesting. He's quoting the verse about himself. And then he says, simply by chanting, this is verse 11, simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna, one can be freed from all undesirable habits. This is the means of awakening all good fortune and for initiating the flow of waves of love for Krishna. And then the 12 is the first verse. Now he starts to recite his own verse. Cheto darpana majanam babama Davagni nirvapanam Shreya kairava chandrika vitaranam Vidyavadu jivanam Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam Varnamrita svadanam Sarvatma snapanam param bijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. And the translation Prabhupada gives here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is, let there be all victory for the chanting of the holy name of Lord Krishna, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. That chanting is the waxing moon that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. It is the life and soul of all education. The chanting of the holy name of Krishna expands the blissful ocean of transcendental life. It gives a cooling effect to everyone and enables one to taste full nectar at every step. So that's the translation that Srila Prabhupada gives here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. First, and we'll take a look at there's beautiful, poetic descriptions here of what happens. It's beautiful poetry, this first verse. And according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this is supposed to produce faith in us, especially in faith in the chanting of the holy name. It's supposed to show us, hey, that chanting of Krishna's holy name does everything for us. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport from 410, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. So somehow or other, we get faith that the chanting of the holy name is the heart and soul of our spiritual practice. As it says, it's the only way in the age of Kali, the only way, the only way, the only way. So it's really the heart of our practice. And so for us to have faith in devotional service, we have to have faith that chanting the holy name is something that's worthwhile. And so the first verse is meant to do that for us. And if we look at it, in some ways, it summarizes everything in the Siksastaka, summarizes those different stages of bhakti. It's showing us that the holy name, when chanted properly, this is important, when chanted properly, is sufficient to take one to the very highest levels of bhakti or existence. It's complete in itself. And that's really what the first verse is going to say. So we'll take a look at it. The last part of the Sanskrit is the part is the beginning of the translation, the Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, which Prabhupada says, for the congregational chanting of the holy name of Krishna. In his commentary on the Siksastaka, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he mentions that this Sankirtan, the sun part, the sun, is a prefix. And it has two connotations. One of them is togetherness. So when we say Sankirtanam, we chant together. Prabhupada says congregational chanting of the holy name of Krishna. So when people gather together and chant, so it has that meaning. But we'll notice, of course, that Prabhupada, he didn't just tell us to do Sankirtan, right? He had us also chant japa, right? Which, I mean, can be done, can be done in a group, but it's a more solitary pursuit. And so Bhaktivinoda Saraswati says that san also it has the connotation of completeness or perfection. Like Sanskrit is something that's completely or perfectly done. Krita means to do, right? So the Sanskrit language is completely done. So he says that in order for all the effects of the holy name to obtain that are given in this first verse, the chanting has to be done appropriately. And the way Prabhupada tells us that we chant while trying to give up offenses. That is, offenses against the holy name will prevent all of the items from taking place. It will cause the potency of the holy name to not be fully expressed. And so there's something. So it's incumbent upon us when we take the holy name, to take it with some, gratitude, with some appreciation, and to treat it with some care for it to work. So that's embedded there in the Sankirtanam. Both things, that we can do it congregationally, but we can do it. We're all given that the japa, people who are initiated, chant japa. That's part of it. But in either case, we need to take the holy name respectfully and with care and appreciation, respect, in order for it to respond fully to our chanting. And then he mentions the various things that come from the chanting. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. So Cheta is translated here as of the heart. It also means, consciousness. It means understanding, intelligence. It has those connotations there. Darpana is a mirror, and the Marjanam is cleansing. Right? So the description, it's a poetic description. It says if your consciousness or your, because the intelligence, the power of discrimination, the power of understanding, comes from the super soul that lives in the heart, who communicates with us. It says that it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the form that we get directions from the super soul is a buddhi, or intelligence, or understanding. So our perception or our understanding of ourselves is covered over. So the description says if you look at yourself in the mirror, and the mirror is covered with dust, you can't get a very clear picture of yourself. So we have a very interesting situation here in the material world as embodied souls, that there's a certain power. It's called the Avaranatmika Shakti. Prabhupada calls it the covering potency. So we are a soul that has an identity, that has a life, but we've been embedded in the physical body, and also in the psychological body. We have it says there's the ego, there's the power of understanding, the intelligence, there's the mind. Sometimes it's called the antakarana, the internal organ. That doesn't mean like your liver and your heart, but the seems to be inside your head, your psychological, psychic experience is there. But the soul itself has a whole identity, a whole spiritual spiritual mind, a spiritual understanding, a spiritual identity. And but to come into this realm of the material world, the Avaranatmaka Shakti gives us amnesia, and we don't know anything about who we really are, and we're thrown into this world. And then it says there's a Prakshepatmaka Shakti that distracts us and gets us wrapped up in all the things around us, and we forget that we have amnesia. And so it says that the holy name begins to clear the dust off the mirror so we can begin to see ourselves. It clears that Avaranatmaka Shakti. We begin to see who we are. At the highest levels, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the mirror of the heart is so cleansed that we can see Krishna. So the holy name has that power. So it's beautiful poetry. Chaito Darpana Marjanam. And then Bhava Maha Dava Agni Nirvapanam. So bhava is material existence, right? And a maha davagni, dava agni is a forest fire, and a maha means big, great forest fire. Prabhupada says a blazing forest fire, so blazing, raging, nirvapanam, extinguishing. So the poetic comparison here is that life in this material world has so many disturbances. So he says, just like the animals or other creatures living in the forest fire are not very happy. There's all kinds of various types of troubles. Prabhupada talks about the threefold miseries, the problems that we have with our own body and mind, the problem that we have from other beings, natural disasters and other, heat and cold and all these other things from the world around us cause various distress to us. So he says, so it says that the holy name is able to extinguish that. And this, as far as I can understand, is really corresponds when we look at the nectar of devotion. It mentions that there's 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, and there's and 2 of them. The first 2 apply to sadhana bhakti in practice. The next 2 apply to bhava bhakti, in ecstasy, and the third pair apply to prema. And it's also going to explain that that sometimes it's said that bhakti is like a vine or a creeper, and when it sprouts, it's a dicotyledonous plant. It has 2 leaves. Right? When plants sprout, they have immature leaves called cotyledons, and some of them have 1, some of them have 2. So dicots have 2, and Tulsi Devi has 2 when she sprouts. You see 2 little leaves. They're not mature leaves, but they're the cotyledons. So bhakti also has 2 little, when it sprouts, it has these 2 little immature leaves. One of them, which is called Klesha Agni, removal of all miseries. And this is what we're really talking about here. And the other one is called Shubhada, the beginning of all auspiciousness. Right? So even Lord Chaitanya mentioned how the holy name can remove all the various negativities. So this means your past karma. It means ultimately the effects of offenses that we may make. All other kind of negative things that are parts of our personality can be removed by the chanting of the holy name. So basically, and also it contributes to, previously it says, the removal of the ignorance that really makes everything go. Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Prabhupada, the Nectar of Devotion, that's the root thing, is that ignorance of who we are, which then gets us involved in activities that aren't beneficial, and various karmic reactions happen, or then once we become devotees, various offenses may be committed that cause negative reactions. And that's the real cause of the blazing forest fire. So when the amnesia starts to go away, and when we begin to practice devotional service, all these the karma is removed. It's mentioned, that karma, even the things you're suffering from now don't seem to be so bad. There's karma coming down the pipeline from previous lifetimes in various stages. Those are removed, and even more importantly, the tendency to perform negative activities is removed. This is all described nicely in the Nectar of Devotion. So this is happening. Right? So all the various karmas, both positive and negative. So good karma causes you to continue to take birth. Right? So karma is extinguished, your offenses begin to go down, and you begin to come to yourself. So that's happening through the agency of the holy name. And then the next one is Shreya, Kairava, Chandrika, Vitaranam. This is more like the Shubhada, or the having all auspicious things start to arise. And so the poetic image here is that Kairava is a white lotus, I think, or a lily that blooms at night. And so and when the moonlight shines on the bud of the lily, it causes it to open. And so here it says that the Kairava, this is the Shreya Kairava. Shreya means good fortune. So that this lotus represents our good fortune. It's the white lotus of good fortune, the night blooming lotus of our good fortune. And the holy name is like the moonlight, which causes it to open and flower. And so that's what it says is when bhakti develops, especially at the sadhana stage, then the negativities are removed and positive things are instilled. The quote in the Nectar of Devotion in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is the one that Prabhupada quotes so often, that devotees get all the good qualities of the devas. So all good things, negative things are removed, good things start to come out. So there's this transformation that takes place through the agency of the chanting of the holy name. And then Vidya Vadu Jivanam. So Vidya means of education, Vadu means wife, and Jivanam, the life. And from I've taken this from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's commentary on the Siksastaka. It says, by the influence of Sri Krishna Sankirtan, the jiva is liberated from his false ego, and the knowledge of his relationship with Krishna is nourished. So now we're coming to the end of sadhana, this place where sadhana gives way to bhava. Because this is also described in the second chapter of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, where it says the knot in the heart is loosened, right? So when we're covered over, when we have this spiritual amnesia, then we identify with the body and the mind and the intelligence and the ego, and that's all part of, and the ego is it's like the deeply rooted attachment that we have. We have this think, this is who I am. And through many lifetimes, the things that have mattered to us most kind of get imprinted right on the ego. This karmashayan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that we have these impressions made from our past activities that are imprinted right on the false ego. Those are the things that we identify and desire and dislike the most are there, integrated into our personality, and it can be pervasive even through many lifetimes. And so it says that the false ego can be completely removed. That's really the last powerful attachment. And then the soul is acting on the soul platform. There's no more attachment with matter. There's no more attachment with mind, no more attachment with body. There's no more forgetfulness. And it says, then the knowledge of the relationship with Krishna is nourished. So this is coming right to the point where that false ego is completely gone. And we jump into bhava. So kind of that, if you can look at it that way, the first two lines are kind of sadhana. Now it continues. It really continues. That, even through the higher levels, there's slight remnants. Vishwanath Thakur explains, even up to the level of prema, there are some remnants of the effects of offenses. So there's still some of the extinguishing of the fire. there's a deepening understanding of yourself and your connection with Krishna. So that's still the Chaito Darpana Marjanam is still happening. Yeah, so as you go along, new things are added, but the old things are deepening, right? In the Shreya Kairava Chandrika, your devotion continues to increase at every level, even when you're at the level of perfection. There's a spiritual kind of mathematics there that perfection can become even more perfect. And your knowledge is increasing also. Your understanding of your connection with Krishna is continues to deepen. But at least at this point, where these are the things that happen, these are descriptions of what I begin to take place at sadhana and then continue to deepen later on. And then the last couple, the next line, Ananda Ambudhi Vardhanam. Ananda Ambudhi Vardhanam. So Ananda, we know, is bliss or ecstasy. Ambudhi is the ocean, and Vardhanam increasing. So it's described that we have great happiness comes from Krishna consciousness, even in the stage of sadhana or practice. This happens. We feel pleasure. We feel some happiness. That's one of the things that gives us faith. Is that we chant Hare Krishna and do service for Krishna. We see, have Krishna's prasadam, associate with devotees, and we feel a certain happiness that's a different kind of happiness than we've experienced before. Prabhupada calls it the higher taste. Param drishtva is in the Bhagavad Gita, seeing something higher. Drishtva, is to see, to experience, to experience something param, better, something higher. And so that gives us, faith and encouragement on in the practice of devotional service. But as one continues to grow, this happiness, gets greater and greater and greater and greater, and at the stage of bhava, where and we've lost all of our material identifications and attachments, and the soul now is fully alive or coming alive. And so this is then the bliss is more like an ocean. It's not just and that's continuing to increase all the time. So there it says that that someone who has experienced liberation from the material world, right? They don't think that that's anything compared to the pleasure that you get from devotional service. So one can transcend the material world, enter into the Brahman effulgence, and feel complete peace and complete satisfaction. The soul by nature is completely satisfied. So one can do that. But like it says in the beginning of the Nectar Devotion in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that the devotees are like sharks that swim in this ocean of devotional service. They don't care for merging into the waters. As the rivers merge into the ocean, but the devotees don't want to merge into Brahman. They want to swim in this ocean of ecstasy. And so it says, compared to this self-satisfaction that you feel, complete full satisfaction that you feel in Brahman, the pleasure of having this connection with Krishna just makes it seem completely insignificant. And so the verse there is quoted, how the devotees, they don't care for liberation if it doesn't contain service to Krishna. Any kind of liberation, they need to have that connection with Krishna. Even if you're living, and there's a different types, right? It says that you can have bodily features like Krishna. You can live on the same planet as Krishna. You can have the same opulence as Krishna. All these various things you can have. Even those are not attractive if there's not service, if there's not a real deep connection with Krishna. You can live on the same planet, right? You can you may not have a deep connection with Krishna. So that's not attractive to the devotees because it's not nearly as pleasing. So it says that when we come into this bhava stage, there's this ocean of bliss. Not, so and it's continuously increasing. This is what's given in the, then this is possible through the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And then pratipadam means at every step. Purna amrita is nectar. And purna means full or complete nectar. Asvadanam, giving a taste, sarva, for everyone. So as we move into Krishna prema, right? It says that there's this full happiness. So the prema is an intensification of bhava. So you have the ocean of bliss. This is even more so. It's becoming concentrated. That's why it's full nectar. And it says it's there at every moment. The connection with Krishna is so powerful. That people don't forget Krishna even for a second. Their connection with him is fully in their minds and hearts, and their desire to please him and serve him is just continually increasing and deepening. And that's something that just gives them this complete. This is here more than an ocean of ananda, but this concentrated bliss that's existing at every single step. This is possible through the chanting of the holy name, proper chanting of the holy name. And then Atma Snapanam, this is where Prabhupada talks about cooling. It gives a cooling effect. But the word for word he gives is bathing of the self. The Snapanam is bathing, and Atma is the self. Complete removal of everything. And Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur, in his commentary on this verse, he says, when attachment towards mundane existence is vanquished, the living entity turns his attention towards Sri Krishna and obtains the cooling and soothing service of his lotus feet. So that's where the cooling part comes in. That I guess when if you're hot and you take a nice bath, you're cooled off. But it's considered to be like this last final purification. In the Madhurya Kadambani of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that the tiny little lingering effects of the offenses against the holy name persist into prema and are only absolutely obliterated after one has a personal meeting with Krishna. So to me, that this seems to correspond with this final bathing of the self. Because I mean, already you are, there's no more attachment there's none of the coverings, the material coverings. The false ego is gone. The material intelligence is no longer any connection with that. I mean, even if you're living in this world, you're not attached to it, or I don't identify with it. Your mind you're not identifying with the mind. You're not identifying with your spirit, your material body, if you even have one at this point. Even people that go to the spiritual world, they don't have any of those things. And so there still may be some just little tiny, it's not, you can't even see it, but it's somewhere in there, some little tinge of negativity that comes from the last remnants of offenses against the holy name. And then by having darshan of Krishna, there is that's completely cleansed. And so that's it. Now you're fully in your spiritual domain. So the holy name does that. That happens through the chanting of the holy name. All those different states, all those different things. So the whole process of devotional service may be done and obtained simply by the proper chanting, the Sankirtan of Krishna's holy name. So right now, because we don't have a good understanding of those higher levels, the faith that we have may not be as strong as it deserves to be. But at least if we contemplate this a little bit, try to at least understand to the best of our ability, having not been able to experience any of these things, but at least understand how this is really, really profound. It's unlike anything that we've experienced in devotional service. And we may hear how pleasant devotional service is, and we've experienced that, but because we're not on these levels, the happiness kind of waxes and wanes and this kind of stuff. So if we think this is what devotional service is, and this is all it can be, then we're selling ourselves short. We're selling the process of devotional service short. So if we kind of begin to try to understand these things, at least from a distance, I think it can kind of refortify our determination to want to continue to progress. And if we see here Lord Chaitanya is declaring pretty boldly that the holy name can do that if we chant it properly. So that's the real purpose here of the first verse of the Siksastaka, is to give us faith, right? That the process where we've undertaken, or thinking of taking, is well worth it. And that even if we've been chanting for some time and we don't see all these things happening, then we can look back, especially to the sand part. Are we doing it properly? And we're gonna next week we'll talk about the second verse, which really we'll take a close look at that, and see what Lord Chaitanya's recommendation is for being able to take the holy name, right, with the proper respect, the proper appreciation, the proper gratitude, and the proper attention that will allow us to enter what Prabhupada calls the clearing stage. Prabhupada says there's 3 stages of chanting, right? He says there's the offensive stage, the clearing stage, and the pure stage. And what we find out from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is that offenses have a certain lifespan, the effects of the offenses. If we commit offense against the holy name, it dampens our devotion. He compares to powerful offenses to be it's like a fever where you lose your appetite. So you lose your enthusiasm and desire for devotional service. It's degraded and reduced by offenses against the holy name. But the effects of those offenses have a certain lifespan. He says, just like after a while, you recover from the fever. So if we are committing offenses at a rate that exceeds the ending of the lifespan of previous ones, right? Because at the same time, certain previous offenses are exceeding their lifespan and are disappearing. The effects are disappearing, and we're adding new ones. If those processes are equal, then we're staying at the same place. If the offenses are building up, we're adding them faster than the old ones are disappearing, then our enthusiasm is going to go down. So this is the offensive stage. But if we're somehow committing fewer and fewer offenses, it's why Prabhupada says, but chanting the holy name while trying to give up offenses, then the past offenses, the big effects are disappearing faster than the new ones are adding new effects. And so there's a process of growth that can happen there. And then at some point, right, the offenses cease, and the effects from them outlive their lifespan. And then we have the effect of pure chanting, the pure name, and that's where all the highest effects come from. So we'll look at the next verse describes 3 stages. So the first one was Shraddha, or faith, and especially faith in the holy name, showing what it can do, and the extraordinary things that are available to us through the holy name. It doesn't take somebody great. It's open to us. And the second verse covers sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya. So Prabhupada talks about just having a preliminary desire for spiritual life, or sometimes he would even say that somebody that would come to his lecture had some faith, because they could be doing something else. So at least they were thinking that there was even some curiosity, even some thought that this might be interesting, as a little bit of faith. And that may cause you, if there's a little curiosity, cause you to associate with devotees. And then if that's a positive experience for you, and you see that devotional service is doing something for them, and then you may start to practice. you know. So the bit of Shraddha turns into sadhusanga, association with devotees, and then you begin to learn more and experience more, and you say, oh, maybe you'll try chanting, maybe you'll do a little service, maybe you'll do this. You try to take up you read or you do something. And then over time, that may develop up to the point where you want to really take up the practice with some seriousness. And that can, be oftentimes comes at the point of initiation, although one can be doing those things. One, in order to qualify for initiation, one is doing those things even beforehand. But so that's bhajana kriya. So it says that the sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, when people take up the practice with some seriousness, and then the anartha nivritti, where the negativities are being removed, and one can come to the level of steadiness. That's what's happening in the second verse. So it's describing then the position of somebody in that kind of area, and especially at how we can reach the anartha nivritti part, where we can begin to remove the negativities, lessen the offenses, you know, you know, become more attached to Krishna. This is what we're really talking about here. So most of us will find ourselves in this verse, right, where we haven't reached the place of steadiness, where we have a little bit of fluctuations in our devotional service. And we'll hear what how Lord Chaitanya describes it, and it will sound pretty familiar to most of us. So, and it'll give us a very strong hint about what we need to do to facilitate, the passing through this verse and entering into the next one, which is describes nishta, or steadiness. And which Lord Chaitanya says the qualities of that assure us of having love of God eventually. So anyway, so thank you very much for listening, and we'll be able to meet in person here or on Zoom live this coming Saturday. We had technical difficulties, and so you're just getting the recording this time. But I hopefully you find it useful to go through the Siksastaka. It's really beautiful.